Welcome back to American Dream. Tonight we're talking about No Child Left Behind, which was a government act that was placed into effect back in 2002, January 8th, to help make sure that no children were being left behind in our educational system. Tonight we have discussing this, we have Paula Millar, who's a 20-year veteran teacher in the inner cities. And we also have Fred Millar, who is an educational sociologist and an activist parent. Welcome back. And what I'd like to do is to go ahead and one of the things that we had is I'd like for you to respond on, is the improved test scores. That this has improved the test scores overall, and it has reduced the test scores between minorities and white students.
So, from the statistics I've looked at, there is the gap is closing according to these standardized testing. My real fear is here that we are going to be graduating a whole generation of children who aren't learning critical thinking and analysis. Rather, they're learning how to take a really decent standardized test. That concerns me. That concerns me that these are not higher level thinking skills, that these are rote many times, and that I don't think we're going to ever see a closing of the gap, at least using this particular vehicle.
Well, I don't think that No Child Left Behind is any kind of silver bullet, but I think that those standardized tests that we're talking about are tests that have impacts. I mean, you have to take standardized tests to get into really good colleges. Mm-hmm. You have to take standardized tests to get really good jobs, mm-hmm. and really good military assignments. It's all really good professional credentials. So taking good tests is not a negligible skill. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it's not the only thing in life. It's interesting to me, I think, that I think we have to look at what we're taking for granted here. What I don't take for granted is that we ought to have a school system where it's graded by your sort of future expectations in life, what people think what your future is expected to be. For example, I think it's probably fair to say that if you were at Harvard, you learn a lot of critical thinking skills. Right. But if you were at George Mason University, a commuter school in Northern Virginia, or much less at Northern Virginia Community College, there's not going to be an emphasis on critical thinking skills. You're not going to be running corporations. You're going to be in a position of obeying a lot of orders in the middle of corporate hierarchies. So, I found in dealing with my students in George Mason University that you could do an obedience experiment with them in which they were asked to do something absolutely senseless, and they would just do it. If the professor just asked them to stand and look at the wall and said, we're going to do an experiment here, and just with a very flimsy rationale say, I'd like you to look at the wall. In other words, they are not being trained to be real assertive go-getter running the world corporate
Does that not go back to the schools that are just saying you just need to learn how to read and write?
It's not all the schools that are doing that. I'm saying that we have a gradation of schools. In other words, you would fight real hard.
I'm not talking about universities, but if we're turning out students that are only with no critical thinking, and if a professor says stare at a wall, they stare at a wall. That's not saying too much for where they're at.
No, I'm not. Look, I'm not advocating that you don't teach kids critical thinking and you only teach them numeracy and literacy. I'm just saying that we should not take for granted the system that we have now, as if the system itself is basically no problem. It's just that some kids are being left behind. That's not the way it is. The school system is designed to provide the workforce that the economy needs. And there's only a few people that they need to be corporate presidents, but they need a whole lot of people to be in the middle of corporate hierarchies who know how to take orders really well. And they need a bunch of soldiers, and they need a bunch of other people who will also follow orders. And
but doesn't a society also need artists, musicians?
Sure.
All of these things.
And there's a little bit of that.
Doesn't it deprive, if you're not teaching that in the schools, does it deprive students from being able to express themselves that way or finding out that they have a talent for it?
From a practical perspective, what I see is that we still have underserved students. We still have underserved students. They've just been forced to be creatively underserve these students now. I have, because of the unfunded mandate that has gone out because of this, money's being diverted, money is being switched around, kids are being pushed out of the school district in order to better their numbers.
And can you explain the unfunded mandate? That is actually the first time we said that tonight. And that is actually one of the claims that I keep hearing, that was that No Child Left Behind could have been a good bill had it been fully funded. It's something over and over that many of the now critics of the bill, who used to be proponents of the bill, say that this is actually where the downfall of it is.
Once again, it's an illustration of sort of a class distinction. We have school districts that don't require a lot of federal funding because they have a solid tax base.
Rich areas.
Right. Then we have school districts in primarily urban and rural school districts where they rely heavily upon federal funding for their school districts. Okay, that's always been like that. It's been like that since the 60s and 70s. And what No Child Left Behind does is it raised the bar for standards, and then said, jump it, but we're not going to give you any more equipment.
So there was no redistribution of the funds anywhere or anything else?
Well, I think there's some funding for No Child Left Behind, but I just think that that's another political struggle. I mean, are we going to be serious about providing the funding that's necessary to close the achievement gap or not? And that's just going to be a struggle, because, I mean, I would maintain that what we don't understand is our school system is not only designed to make everybody succeed. Our school system is providing what the society needs.
Right.
And actually, before we had an enormous influx of immigrants to do a lot of the jobs that are very poorly paid, somebody who graduated from schools had to do that, or somebody who dropped out of schools had to do that. And the fact is, the society will allow a certain number of people to be, quote, prepared for those positions.
Then maybe we could just tell parents from the get-go, from kindergarten, listen, your kid is not going to be a lawyer. Your kid is going to be a foot soldier. And so I'll tell you what, we're going to teach him how to be a foot soldier. And it'll be great, because, really, that's all this kid's ever going to need, because that's all society is going to require of him. And that to me is pretty bad.
Well, it is. It's very unegalitarian. I mean, we have this myth that America is supposed to be an egalitarian society, and everybody's supposed to have equal educational opportunity and everything. I mean, when I did my dissertation in Cleveland, I was looking at the way community colleges were invented. The reason community colleges were invented in the 1960s, 50s and 60s, was to take a huge mass of kids whose families thought they deserved a 4-year college degree and shunt them off into 2-year technical schools, community colleges.
You see, I'm thinking back to, I remember the days of the USSR and how people were assigned at a very young age what their expertise was going to be. And regardless of what their skills were, they were put into classes, and this is what they were going to do. And what you're saying sounds like that's what our school system is doing, except for on a free capital basis.
What we have,
but it's doing it on a free capital and a hidden basis.
Is an affluent school district sitting next to a poverty-ridden school district. They both have the same standards they have to meet. These kids walked in the door already being, many of them, able to meet that standard. So they have the luxury to learn more culture, learn more things. These guys are going to sit here and learn reading and math. Reading and math, no matter where your own personal ability comes from. You may be a gifted student, but you're going to learn reading and math right along with everybody else, because that's what this school district needs to do to compete with this. We are never going to have these kids compete with the kids until there are some other things done to make a level playing field. Perhaps an interspersing of the classes would be one thing.
Really,
we've got a concentration of poverty.
If you